What is going on, everybody? We're back. Brunner and me, and Elite's on vacation, but we miss him. So we got a pretty good episode today. Brunner went to a stand-up comedian, an Abraham Chavez theater,
Yes.
very famous theater. Kevin James performs there a lot. George Lopez performs there a lot. So don't say, oh, I don't. Just a regular theater. No, it's a famous theater. I don't care what anybody says. Brunner, who'd you go see again?
I went to go see the stand-up comedian, and his name is John Mulaney. I'm putting up a picture of him right now, and I've been a big fan of this guy for a long time, for at least like 5 years now. Like I've been kind of like a mini mega fan. I remember like the first time I knew of him was um I used to have like Spotify, not Spotify. I used to have like Pandora back in the day, like in the early days of Pandora. And
Yeah,
what I would do is I would put it on like comedians radio. So just listen to a bunch of like stand ups. So they would play like from their comedy albums. And then
yeah.
his, like they put on his and like it was so funny. And then I went on YouTube and I listened to the whole thing and they had like some video clips of it. So
Mm.
I've been a big fan of him. And then I found out that he was a writer on Saturday Night Live. And, like, again, back then too, I used to be a big Saturday Night Live fan because, like, when I was watching it, it was, like, Jason Sudeikis, um, Bill Hader, Andy Samberg, I think Will Forte was still there, but he was a writer of Saturday Night Live during that time, and Seth Meyers. And then so I'm like, "Oh, cool," like, no wonder, I like this guy so much because he was, like, writing some of my favorite sketches. And he's most notable for creating Stefan, if you're a Saturday Night Live fan or if you know who he is. But and so I've seen like all of his comedy specials. Like, and I saw like he had one on Netflix, his most recent one, and then he had a Broadway show with Nick Kroll. And then I saw
Wow.
that too, and I would see like all the interviews. I would go on YouTube and see all the interviews he's done.
He's Spider Pig.
Yeah, thank you. He's Spider Pig, totally, and he killed it too with Spider Pig.
Yeah, he
And
did. He did a really good job in
yeah,
that movie.
and he's very naturally funny. So so I follow him on Twitter, and I knew he was going on tour. So and Ali told me, he's like, "Oh, I'm
Mm.
gonna see this comedian named John Mulaney," and I was freaking out because I was like, "Dude," he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna take his son." Elite says he's taking his son. It's gonna be his birthday present or like Christmas present. And I'm like, dude, and like I'm like freaking out because he's at least like, I don't know who this guy is. And then so I'm like, dude, he's gonna be hilarious. And then he said he's like, yeah, we had a great time there. So I was like, awesome. So I knew he was on tour, and then I follow him on Twitter, and I saw he posted. He's like, I'm coming to El Paso, and then so I was like,
You had to go.
yeah. I told my mom, I'm like, we have to go because she also likes him. And
Yeah.
so we bought these tickets in like June, and then so we now saw him last
Yeah.
week in October. He came in, and we got the VIP. We sat in the VIP section,
Oh wow.
which is it's not like VIP is a little exaggerated because I had a rough. I didn't think it was VIP
Didn't feel
because
like
it's if I
VIP
pull up
seats.
a picture
Well, you know what?
here.
Nowadays, you pay for VIP and you get basically coach.
Exactly. Hold on, I have a picture right here. I'm trying to pull it up. Right here. So on the screen is the Abraham Chavez Theater. And we sat on the floor, like where those there's like folded chairs by the stage right
Yeah.
there. So we sat on the floor on those folded chairs, and they were like padded folded chairs, but like we were like squished together. Like we were like elbow to elbow, and we paid like VIP. I'm like, I like that we're close, but like you need to like spread it out a little bit. You spread the chairs out a little bit. You have this huge, black floor. Uh, And then, like, literally, like, it was like, It was like it felt like, I was sitting at, like, a high school like, a small high school graduation
Like a
ceremony where,
graduation,
like, they
yeah.
just set up chairs and, like, you're all cramped together because that's what it was. And I'm like, "We paid $280 for these tickets." I'm like, "Dude,
Damn.
like, spread it out because the same year, we pay VIP for SoFi, we get the padded chairs, we get cup
Oh, literally
holders, and
Ghost Rider,
literally these like, people are buying beers, they're, like, just putting it on the floor and they're kicking it." And
spilling, getting on sticky shoes.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, he had 2 people, like, warm-ups for him. One
Opening.
guy, his name was Seton Smith. He was funny. He made some funny jokes, some were political. Like, I'm not gonna say it because I don't want any comments to flood it,
Careful.
but they were funny. Then we had this other guy. I think his name was Dan Levy or Dan Levy, not the other actor, but he's a comedian. I think his name's Dan Levy.
Mm.
And then he said that he was a writer for the spinoff show, Hulu spinoff show, How I Met Your Father.
Oh,
And then so he's like, "Yeah, I know, it kinda, like, sucks a little bit," but he's like, "But I think, I had a great time doing it." But then he's like, "Then one day, Hulu calls me and they say, 'Hey, we're letting you go because we're gonna replace the writing staff with the writers of from the TV show This Is Us.'" And for those of you who don't know, This Is Us is a, like, super dramatic, like, like, drama. So, like, How I Met Your Father was a spinoff of the hit comedy show with a live audience, How I Met Your
mm.
Mother, and then now they're replacing it with, like, sad emotional writers. And then
It's about
he
to get
and
a
then
whole lot.
yeah, and then Hulu told him, they're like, "Hey, we're gonna let you go, but, like, can you, like, tell people, like, we didn't fire you, like, you're just moving on?" And he's like,
Nope.
"No." And he's like, "I'm telling everybody." And then he also said that the father on the show is the Indian guy. I mean, I've never seen the show, but that's what he said. He says that's who the father is.
He
So I'm
spoiled
like,
it.
"Hey," I'm like, "We'll see."
The Indian guy. Wow. He spoiled it because he didn't say
Yeah,
it.
he spoiled it for us. Yeah,
That's
the
awesome.
the warm-ups were hilarious.
That's good, bro. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So, did you get any concessions? Did they sell any concessions while you were there? I bet they're like exaggerated.
Yeah, we didn't get concessions because we weren't really, like, hungry, but, like, they had Pepsi products, of course, can't escape the Pepsi. Um, People were like, pre-gaming John Mulaney, I didn't see, but, like, they had, merch. They had, like, a booth for John Mulaney
Uh huh.
stuff, and, like, "John Mulaney, I love you," but the prices were a little ridiculous. Well, we bought VIP tickets, they automatically came with the shirt. They said it was
Uh
gonna
huh.
be mailed after the show, so we're still waiting on those, but if you wanted a shirt right now, it's $45 for a shirt.
Just a shirt.
Yeah, just a shirt, and it had, like, because this tour is called Face from Scratch, so it had, like, the tour art on it, and then
Uh
the back is, like, the list of shows he was touring. And then he had this, like, nice like, he had 2 posters, I guess one was high quality and one wasn't, like, premium and, like, mid-grade,
huh.
and it was, like, $100.
What was it of him?
It was the tour art, and it said John Mulaney from scratch, and it was, like, a poster, and I think it had again, like, the list of the places he's been to, and I'm like, "That's the only thing I'd be interested in." But I'm like, "Well, I'm not gonna pay $100." And it wasn't, like,
No.
huge or anything, it was, like a 16 by 20 or, like, 18 by
No. Yeah.
16, 18 by 24, it wasn't even that big.
That's not $100. I mean, okay, if you're paying $100 for a painting, it's gotta be like Picasso. You know what I mean? At this
Yeah.
point, yeah, it's stupid because like they make everybody so close, like you said, and it gets so hot, and it feels like 90 degrees. So you want to go buy water, and it's like $18. Last time I was there, I know I just said it was a serious theater, but last time I was there, I saw Sesame Street live. I know, and it was hot inside that theater. But
Yeah.
you know what? Those seats were really comfortable, and I
Yeah.
had enough space to like spread
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, I think it'd be more comfortable if we sat in those red seats, rather than the prop up chairs.
for sure.
Yeah. And then like I got thirsty and I hit up a water fountain because like I'm like and then when we got there we were a little bit confused because we were driving by the theater to park underneath in the garage. And
Yeah.
I saw like these two old people. I'm like, there's no way they're here to see John Mulaney. And then when we go to the booth to pay the lady to park, she's like, "Are you here for the symphony or for the show?" And I was like, "Oh, we're
Oh,
here for the show." Like, "Oh, there's a symphony going on."
so there's two. Yeah, there was two shows in the same building. Wow,
Mhm. Yeah,
sympathy.
yeah.
Shocking.
And then my mother made the smart decision of leaving her phone in the car, but um it was one of those events where like they have these like pouches and then you put your phone in the pouch and then they lock it like they magnetically lock it and
So
then
you can't take pictures?
no, you can't take pictures, can't take video, you can't take anything.
What? Why?
That's how some comedians are. I know like like the first person who I saw do it was like Dave Chappelle and I'm like, well, that makes sense, it's Dave Chappelle. But I guess like a bunch of stand-ups caught on to it. Like they want you to enjoy, I guess, the show. But they put it in these pouches and then they magnetically lock it. And then so I'm like, okay. And then the thing is like huge. I'm and it's tall too. So like if you stick in your pocket, like the thing's bulging out of your pocket. So if my recommendation is if you go to show and they say they're gonna put your phone in the pouch, just leave it in the car because it's not worth it. Yeah. So we go and I'm like, that's gonna be difficult too, because like people who bought like the tickets online, like we paid an extra $10, which is ridiculous from Ticketmaster, to get physical tickets, to have physical tickets sent to us.
Why extra $10? That's dumb.
Yeah. And then which is I don't have the ticket on me right now, but I'll send it I'll put in the edit, but like in the so it's a piece of paper. It's like the tickets are like piece of paper, you've seen them. But like inside of the paper, like there's a little ring in it because they like scan the paper.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, how do you scan paper? Because they're like, we need to scan your tickets, please. I was like, because there wasn't a barcode or anything. Because I was like nervous because I was like, there's no barcode. Like, how are they gonna let us in? And like,
Yeah.
I shined a flashlight in it, and there was like a ring in the ticket. But
Oh, wow.
my point is like, what if you didn't pay the extra $10 and like you have no idea where your seats are? You know what I mean? And like you forget where your seats are.
I guess you gotta print them out before.
Yeah, and then you gotta go back to the people and be like, "Can you unlock my phone so I can know where my seats are?" You know what I mean? Because
Fuck
like
yeah, I mean,
because like we
embarrassing.
had to go, we because we went to one of the like we told the lady, we said, "Do you know where our seats are?" And then she looks at it, and then she didn't even know. She's like, let me go ask somebody else." So we're like, "Oh, great." And then like I walk like I always stay close to her. And then she's like, "Oh, you go down that way, and then it's the lower level, it's ground floor." And then so we go there, and then like we you know we show the guy our tickets, and then we're meet by another usher, and we're like, we show him our tickets, and he's like, "Oh, we were like seat 6 and 7." So he was like, and then like the the way the like the way that the VIP seats were numbered, like they were put on like the head of the chair, like on the metal head of the chair. And it would say seat one. I was like, okay, VIP experience.
Did he lock on eyes to you? Did you guys look on?
He I would like to think he did. Because he was talking to somebody that was behind me. I'll get into it a little bit, but like I made eye contact with him, and I should have waved so I could see if he would have waved at me the way Evan Ingram didn't wave at me.
Add him to the list if he did it. Ingram and imagine the same year.
Yeah. Anyway, and then so like this, the theater's filling up, and then like when the show's beginning to start, we turn around and the place is packed, and thank God so we were like seat 6 and 7, so I was seat number 6. And then there was like a couple like at 1 and 2. So 3, 4, and 5 were empty. So when like the
Oh
show
wow.
had started, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna move over because I'm like, I don't want to be rubbing elbows with my mom. So we
Yeah.
moved over and we got a nice little buffer zone. So thank God. So shout out to those people who didn't make it. Because when we bought these tickets, we checked the day before and we're like, oh yeah, like we're still contemplating it because like we didn't know if we were gonna go. And then the day that we bought them, there was only like 2 VIP tickets left, and we
Damn,
snatched them.
really?
Yeah,
Yeah. So they didn't go. Maybe they tried reselling them, but no one bought them. I don't know, but well, I'm glad you got the little cushion because it's hot in that theater. Man, it's fucking
yeah, it was hot. Like
scorching in there.
even John Mulaney got hot. Like I was getting hot, and then like he even got hot because he wears a suit when he performs, so he took his
Yeah.
jacket off and like threw on the floor of the stage. But when we went there, there was children there. Like there was like 3 children in the VIP seat. Like they're like 11, 12, and 13. And
Oh,
then they were
really?
like, yeah, and then there was like no, they were like 9, 10, and 12. And then there was a girl behind me who was 11, and he was talking to the kids, like, making jokes like, if you have any questions, raise your hand and I'll answer them for you. Eh,
The, did he
yeah.
tell adult jokes?
Yeah, he did his normal routine.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so like, because for those you don't know, he had like a drug addiction. And then so he asked the kids, he's like, kids, do you know what do you know what like rehab is, right? Because he went to rehab.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, do they teach you not to do drugs in school? And like the girl who he was talking to was like literally right behind me. So like he
Yeah.
talked to her and he's sort of looking at me. And then they're like, yeah, they teach us in school. And I'll never forget this because this is such an El Paso thing.
Yeah.
But she said, we have Red Ribbon Week. And John Mulaney repeated to her, Red Ribbon Week? And so
So he
for
didn't know
those,
what the fuck it was.
yeah. And then so for those who don't know what Ribbon Week is, it's a tradition here in El Paso, like middle school and high school and elementary
Sure,
school.
brings
It's like it's an event long thing. And like there's
a
certain
week.
themes of the day, but it leads up to Halloween. But I never thought I would hear John Mulaney say Red Ribbon Week because and then
Crossover.
get crossover, and then he's like, what's the theme for day one? And then he went on this whole thing, and like it was just funny. And then he's like, what's the theme of the day one? And then she's like, dress crazy. He's like, why dress crazy? He's like, because crazy people do drugs. And then and she's like, yeah. And then he's like wearing a suit and he's like showing off, like like admiring, like telling people like admire my suit. And he's like,
Yeah.
proved you wrong.
That's good.
Yeah. And then he's like, what's the second thing? Like Neon Day. He's like, why
Uh-huh.
Neon Day? Because somebody who was wearing neon did drugs. And then she's like, I'm sorry, audience. I know I need to begin my set, but we're only on day 3 so far of 7, or day 3 of 5.
That's funny. Did he go through all the days?
He stopped at like day 4, but it was I mean, it was just funny because one thing I love about him, he knows how to work a crowd. And then so like he begins his routine, and unfortunately, I knew, since I'm such a super fan, I knew all the he's made the same jokes before, but I like the only like I kind of forgive him because like he was just talking about his experience with like being because he begins the story with him like going to an intervention, like his friends intervened on him, and
Mhm.
then like which I knew he's told the story before, but like but his whole stand-up thing was telling the story of how he got like an intervention and has a time in rehab and now he's doing okay now, which is funny. And then he told this girl, he asked anybody in the audience, he's like, has anybody been to rehab before for
Ah,
for drugs. And then this girl behind me too, she raised her hand and she's like, yeah, I've been to rehab. And then he said, oh, like what was the drug you were addicted to? Because for
Huh.
him, it was prescription pills.
Yeah.
And then she said, heroin. And he said, you win. And then and then she said, like, she told her story. She's like, yeah, like, my family was like bugging me to go to rehab, so I decided to go. She's like, I was only there for a week because apparently in rehab, like
Uh-huh.
people, like, they run out of rooms for people to stay in. So she got kicked out because they ran out of rooms for her. And then she said she's been sober now for 9 years. She hasn't done heroin. So hey, shout out to her. You know what I mean?
That's good. Yeah.
Shout out to that girl. And then he's like, the only way I would go to rehab and stay in rehab is if I had to be there, like, against my will, under lockdown. So he told the story. He told on Saturday Night Live of, like, his friend from college invited him, to, be like, hey, let's go to a dinner party. Like, let's come over to my place for dinner. He's like,
Uh-huh.
okay, and he didn't know it was an intervention, and he was like 2 hours late. And then so he said on the way there, he bought drugs from his dealer,
Wow.
and then, and then he said he got a haircut. And then he said, and then so he's like, I'm thinking it's normal. And then he's like, and then I see all my, Hollywood friends there. He's like, oh shit. And then he said, can I go to the bathroom? And they're like, no, sit down.
Damn.
Because they knew he was going to do all of his drugs. And then, and so he told that story. And then he said, he even had friends over Zoom join in the intervention, which I think is so weird.
Yeah, that's weird.
And then he said, that Seth Meyers, he asked, he was emailing the people going to the intervention, saying like, hey, let's not attack him. Let's, like, be nice to him, be like, hey, we love you, and we need, you need help. And so the person they forgot to email was Nick Kroll, who was there over Zoom. And who's the first person that goes up? Is Nick
Cool.
Kroll. And then he's like, Johnny, you have a problem, Johnny. You need help, Johnny. This is disgusting what you're doing, Johnny. And then they're like, no, Nick, stop.
That's funny.
And then so he's like, and then goes on, but he's like, but at the end, we reached the climax of the intervention where I agreed
Mhm.
to go. And then, so of course, Nick Kroll over Zoom doesn't hear me. And he says, say yes, Johnny. You need to go to intervention, Johnny. And he's like, he said it, Nick. He said, I'm going.
So yes, that's that. Right, that was funny. That was actually funny right there.
Mhm.
That's good set, man.
And then he said, and then, like, he's like, okay, I'll go. Like, I'll make a plan to go. And they're like, no. He's like, wait, do you have a car waiting for me downstairs already? He's like, yep. He's like, okay, I'll go on one condition. I'll go to rehab, but not the rehab you guys choose. He's like, just out of spite. He's like, I'll go, but not the one you guys choose. I'll go to any other one. And then so he goes to one, and then he said that, on my way there, he was like, I was thinking, I was nervous, that people are gonna recognize me in the rehab.
Yeah.
He's like, but once I got there, I had a new fear emerge. Meaning that nobody, like, he had the fear that nobody knew him. Why didn't people know him?
Oh, okay.
And then he told the story. I don't know if I want to say this or if I'll leave it in, but I just want to say don't do this. He told the story of how he got these, like, prescriptions for, like, Adderall and, like, Xanax and, like, something with a C, I forget. But anyway, he's like to get these drugs. He's like, don't do this, kids. That's what he told the audience. He's like, don't do this, kids. He's like, go on WebMD and then go to highest rated doctors. in your area, and then click lowest rated doctors. It's not going to be that hard to find them. And then he's like, because he's like, they're doctors, but they want to keep their business alive. And so he said, I found a doctor. His name was Dr. Michael. Never said his last name. It was just Dr. Michael. And he said, whenever I went to see Dr. Michael, he didn't have an office. I would go to his apartment. And then
Wow.
every, and he said, he's like, I would knock on the door and he would say, and the doctor would open it and he would say, my wife Minerva is sleeping. He didn't say keep it down. He said she was just sleeping. And then, and then so like, and so he said one time, he's like, hey, I need this prescription for this. And the doctor said, okay. And so the doctor starts writing it, right? And
Mm.
then so he says, as he's handing it to me, as he's handing me the prescription, he says, what do you need it for? Like, and then he says, oh, I get anxiety. Oh, well, this should help take care of it.
Yeah. So he doesn't even know. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he said the thing, but he's like, but the thing with Dr. Michael is he always wanted to give me a shot. And he's like, do you want a flu shot? Do you want a B12 shot?
Yeah.
And then so he's like, but the thing with Dr. Michael is I would roll up my shirt and Dr. Michael would go, you need to take the whole thing off.
What the fuck?
And so he would always take, and then he would take his shirt off. And he's like, I've gotten 2 flu shots in 1 month. He's like, and every time I would get a shot, Dr. Michael would always ask me, take the whole thing off. He's like, and every time I went to him, he'd always say, my wife is sleeping. My wife is sleeping. He's like, I don't know if that's a cover because he killed his wife, but he's like, but he would always say, Minerva is sleeping. Minerva is sleeping.
That's
And
so
then,
creepy, huh?
and then he told the story of when he got to rehab. They asked him, "Do you have any do you have any drugs on you?" And he said,
Uh-huh.
"No." Can I go to the bathroom? Because he still had the drugs he bought earlier that night on him.
Yeah.
Because he got there at 4 in the morning. And then so they're like, "Okay, sir, we need you to empty out. We need empty out your pockets and give us your coat, right?" So he gives them the coat, and that's when they pull out his baggie of drugs, and he's like, "Oh, you know, those old winter coats with the drugs in them." And then, but I had a really good time seeing John Mulaney, and then he told, and then I want to leave it. I just want to tell these last 2 stories, and then so he was like, I was at rehab for a while, and then the news broke out that I was attending rehab, and it was in the paper, and then so the rehab clinic got the paper, and
Mhm.
then so he's like, "Hey, everybody, come look at this!" And his face is in the paper. He's like, "Who? I wonder who that could be." And then one time he said he got in trouble because he ordered DoorDash. He said there was only 2 things. He's like I went to rehab in this small town in Pennsylvania. The only 2 things that the place had was the rehab clinic and Outback. So I got in trouble for ordering Outback Steakhouse on DoorDash. And then he's like, I remember telling the DoorDash delivery guy, like, hey, just ignore that building because I didn't want him to know I was in rehab. Just ignore that huge hospital building
Uh-huh.
and drive past that. And then he's like, and drive to a brick building. And then there's going to be a man in his 30s, so happy, excited to see you out on his front porch. And then so one of the hospital administrator guys calls him in, be like, you can't be ordering Outback, you can't be doing that. He's like, why not? And then I think he said like, you're gonna double dip or something like that. And he's like, you're gonna give that. He's like, because if you do that, you're gonna give the guy a big tip, and then you're gonna order it again, and you're gonna say, hey, do you remember me? I'm the guy who gave you a big tip. Can you give me a favor? Can you buy drugs for me? And
Oh.
he's like, and in my mind, I'm thinking that is such a good idea. And then he's friends with Pete Davidson. John Mulaney's friends with Pete Davidson. And then so he's like, the thing with Pete Davidson is he'd always get a new phone every week. And then he would say, "Hey, John, this is Pete. This is my new phone number." And he said, "Prove it." And then Pete would send him a selfie. And he's like, "I have a collection of Pete Davidson selfies." And then he's like, when I get bored, sometimes like I would just have contacts of Pete new phone, Pete new phone, Pete new phone. So I just got bored and I started calling them celebrities. So when I was in rehab, I listed him as Al Pacino. So I was sleeping that night and I had my phone out. My phone was going off. And the nurse looks over at my phone and she sees that Al Pacino is calling me. And then so he says that she wakes him up saying, Sir, you have a phone call." She hands him the phone, right? And he sees
Uh-huh.
it's Al Pacino, but he knows it's Pete Davidson, but he plays it off like it's Al Pacino. And he goes, "Hello?" And then Pete Davidson's like, "What up, dog?" And then John responds, "What up, dog?" He's like, "No, I'm fine, dog." And then he's like, at the time, people were blaming Pete because like, oh, Pete Davidson's taking drugs with John Mulaney. And then so Pete Davidson says like, "Hey, are they blaming this thing on me?" And
Mm.
he's like, "No, they're not blaming this on you, dog." And then he's like, in the nurse's mind, she's thinking that 8-year-old Al Pacino is asking me if he's the reason why I'm here, why I've been doing drugs. And he's like, "I love you, dog," and like hangs up. But he did this whole Al Pacino impression. It was funny. And then yeah, but I mean, John Mulaney killed it. It was hilarious. He was funny. The whole show was packed. Um, if he's coming to your city, um, you should go check him out. Like I say, if you're a John Mulaney fan, like don't be like, "Oh, well, he's telling the same jokes again." Or be like, no, like if I were to take you, Anthony, who like has no idea who he is, like the jokes still kill, the jokes still land. But like I had a great time. Like, dude was hilarious.
Yeah, I feel like I would have a good time too. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you laughed your ass off.
I want to say one last joke. So at the end of the show, at the end of the show, you know, he was talking about the whole insurrection thing. He made the joke before, but he was talking about the insurrection thing. And be like, how many insurrections were there when I was before I went to rehab? Zero. How many insurrections were there? After I got out, zero. He's like, because they know they can't. There's no insurrections when I'm on the street. And so this little girl asked him because he asked the little girl who was in the audience, asked
Yeah.
him, "What's an insurrection?" And then he's like, "Oh," he's like, "Do you remember, little girl, when the people stormed the White House?" And then I don't know if they call that Freedom Day here, but over here they call it the insurrection. And then he says, "I love it." He's like, "In all the states I've been in, I have to explain what the insurrection was in the state of
Oh
Texas."
yes, thank you. Check out the socials. We appreciate everything. See you guys next week.